Hey, I'm John, one of the course creators and producers at Soundfly. Today we're going to take a look at the basics of MIDI quantization. So what does quantization do? Quantization takes our incoming MIDI events and relates them to the grid, and our grid is determined by our tempo. So in this particular project, I'm at 80 BPM. As I play notes in, Logic's going to relate the notes I play in to the grid based on that time. So here's an example. I'm just going to play in a kick and a snare. So that's just a 4-bar phrase, and now we can check out how Logic has related that performance to the grid. So this window just represents the MIDI that we've played in. You can see I'm ahead of the beat, behind the beat, ahead of the beat, behind the beat. I'm all over the place. There's a couple reasons for that. One, I'm not the best keyboard player ever. Let's get that out of the way. Number two, latency occurs because of our buffer size and the plugins that we have going on in our session, things like that. That can really throw off our perception of time. So quantization can help us account for all of these issues and some. So let's take a look. So the first way I can kind of deal with these timing issues is to hop into the piano roll editor, and I can highlight all of my bum MIDI notes and I can select the quantize time. So here we have quarter, eighth, 16th, and you want to kind of pick something that represents most accurately the subdivisions you played in. So here I played a 16th note before beat 4, so 16th notes is great. If I click Q, they all jump into perfect position in relation to the grid. But let's say I don't want to do that. Let's say I want to keep some of that like human feel. What I can do is play with this strength slider here. And you can see as I play with this, this is determining kind of the percentage that we move towards perfectly in time. So if I set it to 50, we're 50% closer to being on our grid lines. If I set it to 75%, we're 75% closer to the grid lines, 100% closer to the grid lines. We're dead on the grid lines now. So here's what that sounds like now played in time. So that's fine. That works really well a lot of the time. But, there's no real human feel to that. If we want to preserve some of that original performance, we might only quantize some of these notes, and we might leave some of them kind of where they were. So if I undo a couple of steps, we'll get back to the original timing here. And now I can select certain events that are really important. So for instance, the first major downbeat of each bar, wherever I hit it, should probably be in time. So another way I can quantize is I can just hit the Q key, and that's going to automatically snap these to 16th notes. And let's say I also want the backbeat to be perfectly in time. I can highlight all of those and hit Q. So now let's take a listen to that. This is the major downbeats and the backbeat in time. So the cool thing about that is we're not hard quantizing our entire beat. There's still a little bit of this fluid, natural vibe to it. So pick and choose the notes that you're quantizing. Don't just highlight everything and hit Q. Sometimes that's perfectly fine to do, but I really like how this kind of gives this some of that natural feel. So now let's add a hi-hat pattern to this beat that we've just created. So what I did there was I overdubbed a part. Overdubbing means that we're just adding to our existing performance. So you can see the hi-hat has been added on top of our existing pattern. And now, just like before, I can quantize this based on 16th notes. And let's try that to start. So I just hard quantized it. We're at 100. We're going to dial this back a little bit so it's a little bit off the grid. And let's take a listen. Cool. So that sounds pretty good to me. Now let's check out what swing does. So what is swing? Swing refers to the way that smaller subdivisions like 8th and 16th notes relate rhythmically within a part. So our current hi-hat pattern we would refer to as straight. Each 8th or 16th note is given equal rhythmic value. So this 8th note has the same time duration as this 8th note, same 16th note has this duration as this 16th note. Swing is going to alter that. And basically it takes the first note within that pair and changes its duration to be longer. And then it takes the second note within that pair and changes its duration to be shorter. So if I select all of our 8th notes within this pattern, and here we go, almost there, one more. And I turn up the swing, watch what happens. That second note within each one of these pairs drifts to the right or later in time. It's not actually changing any duration here so much as it's changing the position of the grid. It's distorting the grid a bit. So here's what that sounds like with swing turned up to 100. So it kind of gives it this extra motion that's kind of cool. 100's pretty intense, but maybe if we bring it back to like 40 or 50 or something, let's see what that sounds like. So I'm happy with that. That's what swing does. It's a really powerful way to add a little bit of extra sort of motion to your beat. So give that a shot. So just to recap, these are kind of your three main quantization settings. You pick a subdivision, and that locks your performance to the grid that you define. And then your strength moves the notes from their original position to the grid that you define. So if you pick 50%, it's going to move them 50% closer to the grid from their original played-in position. And then finally, swing, which, as we just saw, alters kind of the rhythmic relationship between pairs of smaller notes, subdivisions like 8th and 16th notes. Between those three things, there's a ton of power and potential. So in a future video, I'm sure we'll go over grooves and groove templates. One final thing to point out for you Logic users, the piano roll is one place where you can do a ton of quantization stuff, but you can also quantize out here in the arrangement window. It's a little bit more macro. So if I pick this region here up in the top left, we can choose one kind of quantization setting to align that whole region to. So that's also really useful and powerful. Swing, of course, and you've also got strength. So hope that helps you out. I'm sure we'll see you in another video soon. Head to soundfly.com to check out our courses, subscription, mentorship programs, and more. For a complete rundown on quantization, hop on over to our blog, Flypaper, to check out Aaron Trum's latest article, What is Quantizing and How Do I Use It? And don't forget to subscribe for future tips and tricks.